All right, peace and blessings. Assalamu alaikum, shalom. Welcome, 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 everyone. We are back and we are live. Our topic that we're talking about today, it is the blueprint. It is the blueprint of how can we be integrated with political power and economic power. We're talking about the ballot and the pocketbook. How can you can you have one without the other? We have achieved a great level of economic power in America, but even with that economic power, the principles of freedom didn't come with it. So there's something more to it than just economics. So we're going to get into it and talk about this today. And peace and blessings, Doc. How you doing?
I'm doing great, brother. I'm doing great. Glad to be here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Excellent. You know, I wonder. We were talking offline about the different political views on Fox and MSN. But when it comes to Black nationalists, revolutionary nationalists, as you say, where do they go? Where do we go for our source of news? Because MSNBC ain't it, and Fox damn sure ain't it.
No. I think that we have to have a foundation. And once you have a foundation of what it is that you believe, what you think, you have some materials to pull off of that you're able to, in many ways, engage. I don't care if it's CNN, MSNBC, or Fox News, PBS. You can engage what is being offered. And you, in many ways, have to measure it up with what you know about life, about the Black struggle, about reality. And we've dealt with this long enough that we shouldn't be fooled. We shouldn't be duped. As Malcolm said, hoodwinked, bamboozled, led astray, run amok, because we have a base, and we understand when somebody is, and I don't care if they're on the left or they're on the right, when they're trying to manipulate us and guide us towards their political viewpoint and what it is that would benefit them. We have to always center Blackness, center Black folk, and center what is good for Black folk. And as these ideas and this news and what have you, these op-eds come into being, we have to measure it along that. Is it good for Black folk? Will it be good to Black folk? And if you can come up with a yes on both of those, by and large, you should roll with it.
Okay, definitely. And did you know? Candace Owens is on her quest to get justice. But did you know now that she's come out and she said that the stuff, because they called her anti-Semite now. She has that label.
Oh.
And and she says that
turn on her?
big time. She says when she got into the media and stuff, they fed her lines about Minister Farrakhan, and she just quoted it because that's what she was getting paid to do. And she says, now I'm sorry for that. I shouldn't have did it because now they name me as the anti-Semite. And I'm just trying to tell the truth.
When? So, which one? At what time are you trying to tell the truth? And that's where the problem comes in. Where are you trying to tell the truth? Are you telling the truth now, or were you telling the truth earlier? It's one of those where it puts you in the mind of, well, you're really up for sale. In this situation right now, you're trying to possibly finagle and wiggle yourself into a more advantageous financial position amongst Black folk, because that other bag that closed on you. So now that you run over here and sort of fang dangle your way into the Black sphere. So you shouldn't trust people who change like the weather.
Exactly. I definitely agree with that. Um, and it's very interesting that these so-called black influencers that hobble around white folks that get the bread and butter think that just by saying stuff that we already knew, that okay, everything is forgiven and you're welcome back, and it's just going to be a love fest. Doesn't really work that
There can be a love fest
way. Mm-mm.
because you've proven that you'll do the bidding of whoever is the highest bidder. Period.
Mhm.
There's no getting around that. I'm a Buckeye, and one of my life principles that I just sort of try and live my life according to this is you win. Woody Hayes said this, our famed football coach. Coach Hayes says you win with people.
Mm.
And when you really think about that, surrounding yourself with good people in your circle, it removes so much of the junk that
Mhm.
other people have to deal with, because
Mhm.
people have their own agenda, people have their own idea. I should be the one up front. I should be the one doing such and such. And in the process of all these eyes, the concept of the we, of the collective, is completely lost. Lost
Mm.
to on all accounts. There is no we in
Mhm.
regards to that. So I don't
Mhm.
trust. I don't trust that.
Exactly. Exactly. So on today's program, we're going to be dealing with how do we build the lasting reality for ourselves. The program, the Blueprint and the Ballot, re-examining Black economic self-sufficiency as a political weapon, provides a clear and urgent answer. So, Doc, when we're thinking about freedom, and we talked last week about the difference between liberation and freedom and how they should go hand in hand. Today, we're going to deal with economics and political capital or political power. Are these things opposite of each other, or do they actually work to coincide with each other to produce this freedom, this liberation that we are as a people are seeking?
You're saying politics and economics?
Yes.
No, they're inseparable. They go hand in hand. And if you're really doing it correctly, I guess I could say, so much of that economic might, so much of the economic collectivism that we have in regards to circulating the dollar, and we have to mention sometime, in this discussion, that when you're talking about the idea of economic collectivism and circulating the dollar, it comes with a responsibility towards the individual who is receiving those dollars. We aren't putting those dollars in your pocket for you to just live large and what have you.
Mhm.
So when you're talking about if you're doing it correctly, your economic wherewithal, your success in that arena should be poured into the political arena, should be poured into supporting candidates that are going to advance your agenda and your worldview. They go
Mhm.
together. There's no doubt about it. And one of the things that I've often said is quite simply, it's impossible for you to go out and win a football game and you're only running. You don't pass, you just run.
Mm.
And the process of liberation, the fight for liberation, has to be looked at similarly. And I know that we got a lot of brothers and sisters who have withdrawn themselves from the political arena, but we got to get over that and
Mhm.
realize that we have to fight them economically, politically, socially, culturally. You got to fight on every front. You
Mhm.
can't you can't think that you're going to circulate the dollar and not have a political voice, because if you do that, they're going to just change the laws. They're gonna raise the taxes, and they're gonna take that money directly out of your pocket.
Mhm. Exactly. Exactly. Um, let's go back in time. And let's start with Booker T. Washington.
Oh, you know that's my man.
Exactly. Booker T. Washington, did he involve or talk about politics at all? Or he was just for the economic side?
We'll see, once again, with Booker T. Washington, you have to evaluate him within the historical context that he was in, number one. And a big part of it, and also a big part of understanding Booker T. Washington, is predicated upon the idea of, you ever heard the saying, pay less attention to what they say and more attention to what they do?
Right.
Booker T. Washington is one of those figures, because Washington, let's be very honest, his bread is being buttered by white philanthropists. If you go on the campus of Tuskegee right now, you will see the name Carnegie, Rockefeller, and Ford on buildings, and on buildings that are being constructed. They still are supporting this man. So when you think about receiving that white dollar, Booker T. Washington is unable to come out very strong politically and to say some of the things that Du Bois would say. And keep in mind, Du Bois was fired from the crisis, the NAACP's news organ, 6 or 7 times for what he would say. Booker T. Washington can't be Malcolm because he's not economically independent. He can't get out there and talk wild because that money would be gone. However, the question, you have to go one step further when you're looking at Booker T. Washington and really ask this question of, what did he do with his money? And the truth of the matter is that we now know for sure that Booker T. Washington had an economic machine that fed a political machine. Nobody gave more money to the NAACP than Booker T. Washington did during his life. No one started more Black businesses than Booker T. Washington did. Garvey comes in and sort of exceeds him. But Booker T. Washington was starting businesses. He was giving money to Black endeavors. So politically, Washington talks in his famed speech, the Atlanta Compromise, what they call the Atlanta Compromise. And he says that it is important and right that the vote be ours, but it is equally important that we be prepared to utilize the vote. And of course, he had to throw the latter part of that statement in there for the white audience to appease them. So Booker T. Washington understands very, very well that we need to have a political voice. We need to be engaged politically. So for him, I would argue politics and economics go hand in hand as well. It's just that he can't talk about that so forcefully in public.
Now, and correct me if I'm wrong though, but during Booker T. Washington's time, Reconstruction has already passed, correct?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Reconstruction ends in, technically, historians that would put it at the end of World War. Well, Reconstruction ends in 1876, 1877 with the Rutherford B. Hayes, Samuel J. Tilden election, where the South is going to basically concede the idea of home rule. They want home rule, and they're gonna allow Hayes to become president if they're allowed to have home rule, and that's exactly what they do.
Now, because last week we talked about this a little bit as well, the difference between what was going on in the North and the South, where in the North, our people still were voting. It was just in the South that our people were not voting. We know that during Reconstruction, the Black elected officials from the South was elected. So
during the second stage, during congressional Reconstruction. Yeah.
Okay, break that down.
Well, you have 3 distinct stages of Reconstruction. The first one is presidential Reconstruction. Lincoln heads it, and Lincoln is primarily talking about We need to ratify the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. We also need to have a Freedmen's Bureau that is going to monitor land contracts, not just for recently emancipated Black folk, but also for poor white illiterate yeoman farmers. They don't know what they're signing. So we need someone who can watch that. Lincoln's going to be killed 4 months in after the U.S. Civil War. He's killed in April of '65. Andrew Johnson takes over, and Andrew Johnson does the worst job that anyone could ever imagine until now as the president, to the point where he's going to be the first sitting American president to be impeached. When he's impeached, that begins the second stage of Reconstruction, which is going to be congressional / radical / Black Reconstruction, where the Republican Party is seeking to punish the South for what it is that they've done. And a major part of punishing them is taking the vote from them. So when you're talking about taking the vote from them, you're going to concentrate and make the Black vote much more powerful. And then you had a third stage, which is going to be Southern Reconstruction, which is the South taking it over again.
So when the Blacks in the South were elected to these political offices, I'm assuming that the Blacks in the North were elected to political offices as well.
No.
At the same rate.
No,
No?
not at all. Not at all. I mean, you don't have a concentrated Black vote. You have a concentrated Black vote in the South, because if you picked up guns, and what the radical Republicans are basically going to say is that if you picked up guns against this nation, you're no longer a citizen. So white Southerners can't vote. They're going to have to be brought back in through a process. And it's really the, how can I put it? It's the radical Republicans fucking with them. That's that's what it comes down to. That they're just fucking with them. And they're saying, no, you're not allowed to vote. You can't come in here and do anything. And so that concentrates the Black vote in the South. But relatively speaking, the majority there hasn't been a time in this nation's history where the majority of Black folk were not living in the South. So you're dealing with a situation where Black folk in the North, just numerically, they don't have. I mean, look at what happens today. Go back and look at Obama's election. If you look at a state like Ohio, my home state, Obama lost 85% of the land mass of Ohio, if not 90%. Okay, Obama won Toledo, Dayton, Cincinnati, Cleveland, and Columbus. Those are the population centers. So you don't have enough Black folk in non-Southern regions to really have political might, unless you have a situation like what we saw with Harlem and their repeated election of Adam Clayton Powell Jr. You'll have that going on, but you don't have a mass of Black folk who are able to elect Black folks like they did in the South. You just don't have it. It doesn't exist.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, that's good perspective then. Okay. So then when did the exodus for Black people actually start?
What was that?
A video that we may get into later tonight.
Okay. It can't wait to be released. You'll say, "Look here, let me out." Sound like a demon that was trapped up in there.
Exactly. So when did the exodus from the South go for Black people to get up to move up to the north. When did that happen? Because I'm trying to get my timeline right.
The Great Migration.
Mm-hmm.
You have to remember that several things are going to happen. Number one, the election of Rutherford B. Hayes and the resigning of the South to allow it to have home rule. You're dealing with 1876 right there. Rayford Logan calls that period the nadir. He says from that point forward, it's the lowest of the low for Black folk ever. Well, the only friend that Black folk have ever had has been the Republican Party in the South to that point. That was the party of Lincoln. That was the party that worked in their benefit. So that period between going back to Reconstruction, presidential Reconstruction is 1865 to 1867. Mm-hmm. Southern congressional congressional Black radical Reconstruction is 1867 to 1871. Okay, by 1870, 1871, we start seeing these laws called the Enforcement Acts that make it impermissible, make it illegal for you to wear a hood out in public. Clearly, you're aiming at the Ku Klux Klan. So from 1870 going forward till about 1894, we get the Plessy case, Homer A. Plessy's case. The octoroon who goes ahead and gets on the train, and he's trying to, in every way, create a federal case, because Black folk believe that the only reason that they're catching the hell that they're catching is because the Republican Party, the federal government, does not know about it. So we got to get them back in Southern affairs. Well, the Plessy case isn't decided right away.
Okay.
Booker T. Washington gives that speech in 1895 that Black folk call the Atlanta Compromise. And one of the consequences of that speech is that he has convinced white folk that Black folk don't want social equality. So 1896, we get the Plessy decision, Plessy v. Ferguson, and it says that racial segregation, separate but equal, is permissible in this nation. That's 1896, putting Black folk in a dilemma. And many Black folk, some Black folk, not many, but some, are going to make that decision that Malcolm talks about in many of his speeches, where he says any place has got to be better than here. So right around the turn of the century, we're talking about the post 1896 period, you see Black folk begin to leave the South, and they're fleeing the South because if they're caught trying to leave, they're going to be incarcerated and have God knows what done to them. So all of that is in many ways really playing into what it is that is going on with the migration of Black folk. And you have to remember that when you're talking about Black folk migrating, they're not welcomed. Let's just be honest about it. They're not welcomed by other Black folk, by and large, out of the South. Black folk who are not Southerners shun Southern Black folk because they're that much culturally different from them. You're talking about people who, by and large, are, how can I put this? They're loud, boisterous. One could argue that they don't belong in these areas. And there's something to be said for respectability politics, in that you have a sizable or significant population of Black folk who are really concerned with respectability politics. And they don't want to be embarrassed by these countrified Black folk who are coming out of the South and into their areas. They're too loud, they dress country, they're this and that. And it's not accidental that by the turn of the century, you see Black folk leaving the South in a great migration. And you see a lot of Black folk going ahead and creating fraternities and sororities, Jack and Jill clubs. They're trying to create a social buffer between these Southern Black folk.
So, just a little bit off the topic, but this question just popped up into my mind as I'm listening to you. Mm-hmm. So, these people that shun the Southern Black folks, would these Northern Blacks, would they become the Boule people?
I believe some of them would. Yeah, some of them would, because you have to remember, and it's one of the more convoluted aspects. One of the more convoluted aspects that you're going to have to deal with is quite simply that Black folk are diverse. We're not a monolithic population, but you have a class of Black folk who don't want, how can I put this? Who don't want anything to do with poor working class or lower middle class Black folk. They consider them to be beneath them. These are people who are by and large devoid of a racial consciousness that would override everything else. You know Black folk, hell, me and you, who want all Black folk to win. Mm-hmm. Everybody don't feel that way. They're really concerned with just a certain population of Black folk winning, and that's an issue.
Wow. John Calhoun asked you a question.
John Calhoun to Cal.
How is there such a limited understanding of the way in which Black people switch their loyalty from Republicans to Democrats even until this day?
How? We don't study history. And that's is just what it comes down to, that the American historical narrative, Black folk have been turned off to it. They think that they know it, and they don't. They know very little about the intricacies of the American historical narrative. Case in point, and it's one of the sticking points for me that I honestly can't get beyond. It is quite simply the mischaracterization of a group like the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense as being a militant race-hating group. They were so far removed from that. So it's a lack of exposure to to history. And it's great to see the name John Calhoun. I will say that for sure. I hope you're doing well, brother. We need to talk real soon. But
so, Doc,
go ahead.
I'm gonna use your phrase. Let's be fair. Is the Republican Party of yesterday the Republican Party of today?
And certainly not. No, not at all. Not at all. There's no way that you could force that argument. You have to remember that when you're talking about Lincoln's Republican Party, mm-hmm. You're talking about a party that was, number one, had tenuous relations with the South. The South is in many ways seeking to exert a control that you could almost say that the South is its own land. And if you want to stretch that even further, you could say that the South is actually going to be a land of 25 different nations. It's the whole argument of states' rights, that they should be allowed to do whatever it is that they want to do, when and how and whatever intensity. Well, the Federalists that you're looking at, as far as Lincoln and those, they're trying to keep the Union together. The Democratic Party does not feel that same way. And you're going to see two major alterations, if we can simplify it. The first major alteration is going to be with, and I'm talking about, when I say major alteration, I'm talking about the switch of Black folk from Republican to Democrat. The first one is going to happen in 1934. That is the first off-year election of FDR's first administration. What FDR is going to do, because you got to remember, FDR is a Democrat, but he's coming out of New York State. He's former governor of New York, and he's a different type of Democrat. And so he's going to be at odds almost immediately with Southern Democrats. There's no doubt about that. What FDR is introducing, it turns their stomach, because FDR is going to create something called the Black Cabinet. And it's a government cabinet level agency. Mary McLeod Bethune was a part of it, of Bethune-Cookman College fame. They're going to create a Black cabinet that's looking into issues that are facing Black folk. You would have never gotten that from the traditional Democratic Party unless they were looking at it on how do we put them back in slavery. So that's one thing. And they react to it by rebranding themselves. They go from being Democrats, and to create separation from people like FDR, they begin to refer to themselves as Dixiecrats. So here you have the Dixiecrats, who are basically former Southern Democrats, but they're never going to agree or go along with what it is that they feel that FDR is doing. That's the first wave in 1934. The second wave is going to actually happen in 1960, when we have the presidential campaign of John Fitzgerald Kennedy. Kennedy is running against Richard Nixon, Kennedy being a Democrat and Nixon being a Republican. Kennedy's losing. And so he has to do something, almost a Hail Mary, to try and catch up. Dr. King, with his troublemaking ass, King is locked up. And King was already on probation for, other protests. These white folk was getting ready to make Dr. King put him in a yard and give him a sledgehammer and make big rocks into little rocks. Black folk couldn't stand for that. So what JFK does is he arranges for Dr. King to be released. And that Sunday before the election, and you have to remember, they actually outlawed this now, but it was a religious tradition for Black folk to vote early. And on that Sunday before the election, the most politically powerful Black man in America was the pastor, because he would say from the pulpit, he would tell his parishioners who they were to vote for. And with what JFK had just done for King, Black pastors got up and said, there's only one man for us to vote for, to even consider voting for, and it is JFK. And so, and you can't forget that Daddy King, Martin's dad, Daddy King was a Republican all the way up to the 1960 election.
Wow. Would it be a far stretch and to say that the present day Democrats, how they do with Black people, is akin to how the beginning of the Democratic Party felt about Black people? Would there be agreement on that?
No, I wouldn't agree with that. I wouldn't agree with that, because you have to remember that when you're talking about that old guard Democratic Party, all the way really, if we go and we look at at Snick's work in Lowndes County, the Lowndes County Freedom Organization, Bloody Lowndes, Stokely Carmichael talks about this. Stokely says, we didn't have to try hard. It wasn't difficult, because you have to remember that they're trying to organize and register to vote illiterate Black folk. Okay. It wasn't difficult to point out to people that ain't the party for Black folk, because at the bottom of the emblem of the Mississippi Democratic Party, it said white supremacy. So no, I wouldn't say that about many of the Dems that are in office now. But
Hmm.
what I will say, and I think that this would take us back to what it is we're talking about tonight, talking about the ballot in the pocketbook. I think that what it does do for them is they black folk are and have been for the longest time kind of held hostage
Hmm.
by the Democratic Party. And everybody knows. I believe that every adult person could, if they're being fair and they're being honest with themselves, they would agree that if you're with a person in a romantic relationship or what have you, you're with a person and you express your love to them and you demand nothing from them,
Hmm.
they're number one going to start taking you for granted. And number two, they're going to start, kind of abusing you because they have some other things that they need to chase down because they already got you. So, let me see if I can increase my stock over here doing this, and that. And there's an idea. It's a historical term that I think applies to black folks' relationship with the Democratic Party today. And it's what Britain told the colonists when they were, they got to that, what is it? No taxation without representation.
Hmm.
Virtual representation. And what the British were saying by telling the colonists, well, you are represented by virtual representation. It's kind of like when you go on vacation, you and your wife go on vacation, and let's say you have five or six kids. Do the kids get a vote necessarily upon where y'all going?
Hmm.
No. But do you consider what could be done by the kids, what's kid friendly, and well, they could go here and they could go there and blah blah. That's virtual representation. That we're not going to do anything to harm us because it would harm you. So by that standard, you are being in many ways represented the entire time. That's kind of what black folk are like with the Democratic Party. That they've said for so long that, yeah, y'all get our vote, blah 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 blah. And the
Hmm.
Democratic Party is saying, well, what we're doing is we're fighting for working class people, we're fighting for poor people, we're fighting for labor rights and this and that, and you'll benefit from that. But they never break off and talk about a black issue like reparations. You're not
Right.
going to hear them advancing reparations. And in many ways, they have to do what Kennedy did. And Kennedy, when he did that Hail Mary, by talking to Coretta to get Dr. King released,
Hmm.
what the Democratic Party, when black folk really begin to agitate, if they ever become politically organized and develop an agenda, what they're going to have to, what the Democratic Party would have to do, and let's say the issue was reparations,
Hmm.
they would have to sit down and have their best political scientists analyze how many black votes are we standing to receive if we begin to promote for reparations. And you could say quite a few.
Hmm.
But that's got to be counterbalanced with how many white votes are we going to lose from white folk who hate black folk and don't think that they should get anything, reparations or any other kind of way. Are you going to gain enough black folk to offset those white folk? Probably not. So you're not going to be able to advance that as an agenda.
Hmm. But do you agree that the Democratic Party has not been a true friend to Black people, Doc?
I believe the Democratic Party has been what all political parties in. First off, let me answer it straightforward. No, it hasn't been a true friend of black folk. Let me start there. but black folk have made some. There have been some strides and some gains with Democratic presidents. Let's be clear on that. But the Democratic Party is a political party. It's interested in votes. It's interested in power. Now, the idea of doing something specifically and expressly for black folk, that's not going to happen unless black folk are able to develop a political solidarity that punishes the Democratic Party for not doing so. And if you don't have that, you really don't have a seat at the table. You're at the kids' table. You're at the table where, yeah, we're going to eat and we're going to make sure you get a little something, but you don't have a voice and you're not going to be a major player for that.
So then we could use the illustration that the blacks that are dealing with the Democratic Party, they're still in the field. They're the field niggas.
Now, yeah, we talked about this before. The idea of, you trying to slide in that Malcolm, historically incorrect Malcolm, that I get attacked by black people all the time when I call Malcolm's words into question. My best friend, he told me, "Oh man, Malcolm said it." I'm like, "What?" So that it's infallible because Malcolm said it? No. I don't care if you're in the field or if you're in the house. Keep in mind, the black folk who were in the house serving the white folk, okay, they had no voice either. They had no say in what was going to occur. You're just here to serve us. And in many ways, when you begin to look at, and that analogy could be stretched to the point where, how many black elected officials have we seen that actually were able to get legislation through Congress?
Of course, I think the one that for me that I always run back to is Adam Clayton Powell. I don't know of another successful politician other than Adam Clayton Powell. Is there?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head against him. Probably the most notable since Powell was John Conyers. But even many black elected officials wouldn't support his efforts in regards to even examining reparations.
John asks another great question.
He's a smart Negro. He's a smart Negro. That's we were at Ohio State together. Smart Negro.
Okay. So his question is there a way for black people to punish the Democratic Party without shooting themselves in the foot, politically speaking?
I don't see a way. Because if black folk were to come from within the Democratic Party, look at what's going on with Candace Owens right now. And that would be kind of the impact, the idea of you being able to lessen your support for the Democratic Party, to throw it over there with the Republican Party. There's just something about dealing with those people and those types of people that it's never going to go well. Look at what's happening with the Latinos, who are all up on stage telling, "Yeah, vote for Trump. I love Donald Trump. Look what it got them. And that's an issue now. What should be talked about is quite simply, how do black folk begin to show the Democratic Party that we're going to run a slate of candidates that are, for in all intents and purposes, going to be our people. And we're going to run them at the local and at the state level. And this is who we're going to vote for. Now, if you lose, then you're it's one of those, how can I put this? Mr. Farrakhan said this in a speech. He said, for Black folk dealing with the political arena, it's like choosing between Satan, Lucifer, and the devil. You're going to hell with all three of them. And so that's in many ways the position of Black folk, that we have to be politically engaged and we have to do it as strategically as we can. But like John Henry Clark said, nobody's coming to save us. The Latinos are not, despite all of the things that should be obvious to them, they're not willing to create a significant and serious alliance with Black folk. Same thing with poor white folk. This is a nation of addicts, and the addiction that these people they have, it's an addiction that leads them to cutting off their nose to spite their face. It is race, it is racial identity, it is ethnic identity. And they are going to join together based upon those things. And even if there's a like-minded group who has the same issues as they do, they're less willing to try and work with them. And that has been the Black plight. I don't care if you're talking about being represented by the Republican Party, the Democratic Party. I don't care if you're talking about the union, the labor union movement. Black folk are always, and I mean always, being left behind because other groups cannot get beyond our racial identity. And that fear, that palpable fear that we talked about previously, that we're revenge minded, that we're going to do to them what they've seen their people do to us. And there's nothing in the historical record that indicates that outside of Gabriel Nat. They had a couple brothers who tried to do it.
So Doc, let me ask you, because Earth Angel 1105 remix, I understand that the question is more likely tongue in cheek, but the substance of it, who is the Democrats? Who are they really? And what is the real platform that they're running that Black people are supposed to be so loyal?
They're very similar, and it's ironic that we started off talking about Reconstruction. In many ways, they're very similar to what happened during Reconstruction. Okay, in the following way, they're devoid of an identity, of a real and significant identity. The fact that Trump was able to come and steal the white worker labor class away tells you that the identity and the voice and who they're talking to has changed remarkably. If you look back at Reconstruction, the Republican Party was composed of three facets. You had Northern Republicans who came south, and they referred to them as carpetbaggers. These were people who were coming to the South with nothing but a carpet bag, and they were trying to get rich. That's one leg of it. The second leg of it were Black folk in the South. And when you talk about Black electoral success during radical Reconstruction, you have to in every way recognize that Black folk are politically powerful. Yet at the same time, there's a third leg, and that third leg are those poor white folk who couldn't vote during the Democratic Party's rule. So you got these three-headed monster, okay? And to go back once again, because it's historically true, it's always been historically true about this nation. Poor whites, these poor whites that the Republican Party reached out to, gave the vote to with the 15th Amendment when they removed any of the monetary or land issues that you would need to vote. These rascals are going to be duped. You want to talk about being hoodwinked and bamboozled. These people are going to be hoodwinked and bamboozled, bro. This argument. Yeah, you over there with the Republicans, right? I see they running that Negra Johnson over there. That should have been a spot that you got. They tap into their white supremacy. They tap into their racism. And before you know it, they're over there now with the Democratic Party. So that alliance has been fractured. If you look at what happened recently with the Democratic Party, you're with the modern day Democratic Party, you're looking at pretty much the same thing. The modern day Democratic Party has allowed itself to be alienated from that main base of white male workers. That's been their base. The automotive workers, the steel workers, what have you. That's always historically, and they took them for granted and they got stolen away. And why did they alienate them? They alienated them for a love affair with the LGBTQ. Okay, with the immigration issue, with all of these different issues. Okay, you love white folk unattended, and I'd be damned if Trump them didn't come in and swoop them up. And the easiest way to sort of Jedi mind trick them is to tell them, there's a caravan coming from Guatemala right now. And it's almost as if some latent DNA in the back of their mind is activated. And they say, oh my God, we're back at the point where, turn of the century, where they were coming north to steal our jobs. So you got the Democratic Party. Who are they? They don't know. They don't know. They don't know who they are.
Wow. So since they don't know who they are, and I think it was Roosevelt who said, nothing happens in politics by accident. It is always planned. And using that, Doc, I have to ask, is that what is the possibility that, well, I don't think it's a possibility. I believe it was on purpose. But the reason why, though, I don't understand. Why would the Democrats allow the illegal immigrants, quote unquote, to rush across the border and to do all of these things and do it without no real stoppages of, we're not going to do that. Why would we allow that to happen?
But let's once again, let's be fair. Obama put out more illegal immigrants than Trump did.
Correct. That's correct.
Okay, so the argument of saying that they just allowed it is a fallacious one at its core. But
it can't. What about your boy? Your ex-president, what was his name? Biden.
You voted for him. You should know his name.
We saw him open the doors to the immigrants. So
you don't know. You don't even know that was you. Don't know that was Biden that did that.
It happened. It happened on his watch. It didn't happen on Obama watch.
What evidence do you got that he was even conscious that was occurring?
Because when a president says something, it matters, and he said.
I don't think that you're hearing what I'm asking you. Okay? And I think you know what I'm saying. Okay.
He was coherent enough.
He was coherent enough. Okay, that's like somebody getting pulled over for drunk driving and they say, I'm sober enough. No, this ain't no gradients where you 20% coherent. You either it's like being pregnant. You never heard nobody say, well, I'm partially pregnant. No, you're either pregnant or you're not. But what I'm banking on that actually is occurring is that when you lose your identity, when you try and stretch that umbrella so wide, okay, that any group in any population can come in and they can have a significant voice. And by significant voice, I mean a voice that is not only going to be heard, but a voice that is also going to make some things move and shake. You're in trouble. You have to have sort of a foundation that this is who we are and this is what we do. They should treat other groups, LGBTQ, they should treat the brown people the same way that they treat black folk. And that is quite simply, if you want to come over here, we're not going to ignore you, but you won't be our single foremost priority. But what the Democrats are making a mistake on is they're doing things that I would argue are correct. Okay. However, what they're correct on is not necessarily the policy. And I'll give you the example of free speech.
Okay.
I believe that even your boy, and I don't know if I can say his name without losing my job. Okay. I'm very cognizant that my daddy was a steel worker, and I asked him. I said, "How can you build us nothing?" He said, "Look at Trump and his kids. Look at all the trouble they in." He said, "I ain't build you nothing because I wanted you to have character." Okay, so I got a bunch of character, but when you look at what's occurring with that guy, and we can expand it to Candace Owens. We can expand it to the king fool of the court. And I almost hesitate to even say his name because I don't want anybody, listeners and participants, please don't go look this fool up, okay? Because he might look in your soul and you think that he God. Jesse Lee Peterson. I agree that Jesse Lee Peterson should be allowed to say what he says. Because I defend the U.S. Constitution. Okay? That's not a policy. That's just a principle. That's an American standard. What the Democrats are doing is that they're allowing other groups to do what white women would not allow black women to do when they had their women's march. The black women show up and they want to be up on the stage. They want to be able to get to the mic, and the white women are by and large saying, no, we have our own agenda of what we're going to do, and boom, 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 boom. If you want to be near the mic, you want to have that type of voice, create your own movement. That's what the Democratic Party should have done. Okay. And let the chips fall where they may, because the LGBTQ community, the brown community, if they get their minds right, they will recognize they're in the same trick bag that black folk are. Okay. What are you experiencing now? They got ICE agents running up on cats, tackling them. Okay. I'm scared to go outside. I'm light skinned. They might think I'm, they might think I'm, I might not make it home some days. Okay. So you have to have a situation where those groups are going to have virtual representation, but you can't risk your main base. And that main base, let's be very clear, that main base is white working class men in particular. Okay. And the moment that you begin to talk about the idea of women's rights, you talk about, LGBTQ, you're going to begin to alienate them. And then what makes it even worse is when you bring in Hollywood stars, because now the Republicans are going to be able to say, well, just, well, look who they hanging out with. I saw Matt Damon up there with him. He ain't working class. So they need to get back. They need to get back to basics.
Wow. Very, 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 very interesting. Very interesting. And back to our subject. Now, we move on to Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey, I don't know. Did he have a political part to his message? I only know of the economic part.
Well, Garvey's not trying to run candidates for Congress or anything like that. You got to remember, Garvey is Pan-Africanist first and foremost, and Garvey is more so concerned with building a black nation. It takes us back to Garvey is almost a precursor to that great line from the Mac, where Roger Mosley, Magnum PI fame, says what we're trying to do is create a nation within a nation, but without a nation. A figure like Garvey is not going to see the necessity of even engaging American politics. What he's going to see is the necessity of building Black. You need your own Black nurses guild. You need your own Black schools. You need your, so that's his thing. Okay. So the idea, and I would make the argument that just because he's not engaging the mainstream American political system, I would argue that what he's actually doing is still very political, very, very political, in many ways, unprecedentedly political, because it's working towards and seeking and aiming for the upliftment of Black folk.
Now, but I have to ask you, because I didn't expect you to say that part, but how is that political if you're ignoring the political process? So how is that?
Let me use a line that I heard John Henry Clark say to Cornel West. Okay. You wouldn't say that to a Jew. Their money is political.
Okay.
They don't have that. They're small in number. They can't elect anybody unless you're talking about electing somebody in a small borough of New York. They can't elect anybody, not numerically, not by themselves. So it's the accumulation of money that is going to transfer into political power, because you know where the money is, and if you want to get elected, you got to go over and deal with those people. What do you want? What do you need to contribute to my campaign? Right. And Black folk have not only the money, but also the numbers to put anybody over the top. So once again, I argue that that's very political. Even the idea of avoiding the mainstream political system is still a very political act when you begin to consider the larger things that are around it. You know, to follow that line of thinking. And I'll ask you this: was the Nation of Islam political before 1984?
No, they didn't.
Y'all ain't political.
They not in the sense of
that's what I'm talking about. See, y'all are still political, but y'all didn't participate in the American political system.
Right.
But are y'all still political?
And you know, that's the thing that where I am analyzing this thing, because the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, when Black politicians would come to him and ask him, you know, and he said, well, when y'all get up there and you back my plan of what we're doing, then yeah, I'll tell my people to go vote for you. But he never did, because they never did, but he would give them money. He would help them financially with their campaigns.
Sounds an awful lot like Booker T. Washington.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that was part of our problem, because you have to, because you're not, in my estimation, you're not going to reach that freedom without politics, because you can own the block, you can own a certain section of the city, but if you ain't making laws, then this lowly white police officer can come up there and wreak havoc because he represents the state. So without that political point, you're not really free.
But I think that only holds weight if your long-term plan is to remain in the United States of America, versus what a Garvey is talking about, you know, leaving, you know, the Back to Africa movement and what have you.
But you know, because I thought about that, and I came up with this, that was the weakness of Garvey's plan, because you're not going to take a whole exodus of Black folks up out of America who have been essentially Americanized, used to 24-hour electricity, used to all of these necessities that we have here in America. Move them over to Africa and expect them to fall in line to a system that doesn't even take care of its most vulnerable, right? It is a strictly, you go out there, you do for yourself or you don't eat type of situation. And Black people are too damn comfortable. Even the poor ones are too damn comfortable to go and struggle.
Yeah, but I don't think that you're talking about Black people. I think you're talking about Americans. Mm-hmm. We've been Americanized. We have a certain expectation, a certain standard of living. Garvey kind of dealt with this in one of his quotes, where he said, I would never seek to take all Black people to Africa. Mm-hmm. He said, because they were no good, they were of no use and no good to our people here. What makes you think they'd be of any use to Africans if we got them over there? Mm-hmm. And that's in many ways what it comes down to. Mm-hmm. That we're once again talking about these ideas, and Black folk, God bless our heart, we constantly do this. Mm-hmm. It's for my money. My argument is quite simply that it's one of the reasons why we haven't went anywhere really. Mm-hmm. Is that even when we have our constructs, we're talking about the collective. Mm-hmm. Because we're a communal people that doesn't want to leave anyone behind. Mm-hmm. But the truth of the matter is that, look here, there's some Negroes that need to be left behind, mm-hmm. that don't even need to be addressed.
Mm-hmm. But do you even think that, let's just say they took all the un-Americanized Black folks over into Africa?
No, we all Americanized. Let's be clear on that.
Okay. Well, okay.
Your frame of reference is here. And I don't care how willing, how much Swahili Shibuya, whatever okay. It's gonna be different. It's gonna be different, Playboy. Mm-hmm. I remember being at and I think I told you about this. We went to a restaurant. We were on our way to Kumasi. Mm-hmm. And I had a group of students. There was probably 25 students. We stopped at a little roadside restaurant. Thought it'd be a good place to stop at because we had maybe another 2 hours drive to make it to Kumasi. Bruh, only half of us ate. Okay, the other half had to eat beef jerky that I had smuggled in my suitcase because we ordered all of their food. And the guy came out the back. He said, "We have nothing left." He said, "We only go to the store 2 times a week, and we're gonna have to go tomorrow because you American, basically you fat ass greedy Americans that come up in here and ordered everything, because think about it. When we go to a restaurant, what are we ordering? An appetizer, an entree, and a dessert. Right. You got 3 courses right there." Mm-hmm. So we roll up in there, we ordering 2, 3. Let me get some extra rice on that, and so and so. Can you imagine what the discussion was back in the kitchen? Hey, we ain't got no more rice, and we out of goat. Okay, so who gonna go tell them? Mm-hmm. And they came out told us, So mm-hmm. if you take those back, it's just one of those where you have to have a heart that says, okay, this will probably not be 10% finished when I leave this earth, but my children and my grandchildren will pick up that 10% and make it 25, make it 40, one day we will be integrated here. But that's a tough sell, especially when you're talking about Black folk, and specifically aiming at Black women who like fucking brunch. Dang, you ain't gonna have no mimosa over there. You get what I'm saying? It's just not gonna happen.
And I don't think, honestly, that the African that's over there would honestly be ready for us and the way that we think and behave versus the way that they think and behave. Because I could really see, that, for certain things, you got to pay this under the table. You got to pay this under the table. And you have this expectation that when you get there, things are supposed to be a certain way. But when you find corruption and you find these other things that's going there, then, a black person from here is like, now see, I'm about to whoop your ass because I'm about to teach you fucking with the wrong one. This type of attitude is going to come out. And so I think that they would have to grow up substantially in their understanding to be able to understand that, no, the corruption thing, y'all can't keep running that same old way. Ain't gonna get you nowhere. But
they're gonna get you out of the country quick. They're trying to mess up their money. You're gonna be up out of there quick, brother. And I know I've never told anybody this story, and there's always amongst black men, there's always we always kind of playing the dozens on each other. And the word, you got to know somebody, you got to have some type of relationship with them to go ahead and talk shit, to play the dozens with them. Otherwise, you're gonna get cussed the fuck out. I've never talked about this in public. Okay, we're in. Matter of fact, it was Kumasi. We were in Kumasi. They have the world's, and if anybody in the audience wants to look this up, they have the world's largest outdoor market. Okay, and I'm talking about humongous, expansive. Okay, and if you ain't careful, okay, you'll step in some boo-boo, or you'll fall into like a gully and all that. You have to be in they're bartering. You got people who are trying to convert money. Everything is a hustle. Everything is fast. And we're walking through Kumasi, and we were traveling with the University of Kentucky. So we got a white lady with us, and there was a brother, okay, who wanted to let everybody know that there was a white lady there. Okay. So he starts like he's the town crier. There's a white lady in the market. And I mean, he said it for like 15 minutes, and he's following us, screaming like she a slave catcher or something. In the market. Okay. So we got all the attention upon us, right? And all of that. And one of the students wanted to buy something from one of, because these are like, imagine a shanty that's divided into like cubicles, maybe 6 feet wide, maybe 10. And you go in there, you look at what they're selling. And so we're standing there, and we see the African version of YNs, okay, standing out there. One of them Africans, okay, he had like a machete in his hand, and he's talking with, there's like 6 or 7 of them, right? He raises the machete and points it towards me, right? Oh, and you know what he said? Hey, that's Fat Joe. That's Joey Crack right there. Yo, Fat Joe is in. I said, man, fuck you. He said, man, fuck you. You look like Fat Joe, motherfucker. Blah, blah, blah. And that just started it. You know what I'm saying? So you're going to have those cultural misunderstandings right there. Okay. And you're talking about taking a people that know very little about what the African is really like, and the African knows very little about what we're like. Those who have never been here, they believe all of us are rich. They believe that we're balling because they're getting their impression and their understanding of what we're like from rap videos and things like that. They have no idea that we over here working, struggling, paycheck to paycheck. They think that we're in the land of plenty. So yeah, you're gonna have some cultural misunderstandings. You take some people over there. I mean, look at the history of Liberia. Liberia was steeped in a civil war for 40, 50 years because the black folk because Liberia was selected as going to be the place where one of the places they were going to send us back to.
Right.
Okay. The capital of Liberia is named Monrovia, named after James Monroe, Manifest Destiny, James Monroe. Well, the black folk who went to Liberia felt like they should be running the country because they've been around white folk. And of course, the Liberians was like, "Are y'all nuts?" And there you go. You got a civil war on your hands. You know, but I'm not going, brother. I'm not going. So there's only one way that I would ever go back to Africa. Only one way is if they got one of them fly planes where you can lay down and just go to sleep in that plane. Other than that, I can't go. You know, you want to talk about getting beat up? Get on that plane for 20 hours and get bounced around in that little seat. Yeah, hitting your little having the side of your, the outside of your knee hit that metal thing on your seat. Oh, it don't hurt the first 3-4 times, but let hit 60 hit you.
Wow. They don't have none of these, these what do you call them? These big old cruise ships going to Africa. They go to every place else. They don't go to Africa.
Man, I ain't never heard no cruise ship going to Africa. What is going to Africa for?
Wow.
That's so ridiculous. I'm finna actually look that up.
Hell, they go everywhere else.
Okay, this thing actually says yes, cruise ships go to Africa, but itineraries available for various regions, including South Africa, West Africa, and East Africa. Nah, bruh, I ain't gonna be able to do it. Okay, here you go. Can last from 10 days to over 70 days.
Good Lord.
Thank you. You see what I was saying? I was just down here at this conference. I bonked out early because I couldn't, I got there Friday. It's Sunday. It's time for me to go home. Stay down here all week with y'all. So
Wow.
Unless y'all can arrange for me to have one of them where I can lay down in the bed, and I'm gonna need two doggy beds, okay? Because my dogs gotta go with me. Look, 20 hours don't sound bad now. Yeah. And Mac, if you do go, I hope you get to go to a village where there ain't no electricity. Take your black ass back. Damn power outage. I ain't had no power. Sitting over there. That's why the turkey leg cut closed too.
Wow. I want to take this time right quick to welcome everybody to the program. Big brother Willie Rivers, peace and blessings. We're glad that you're here. Mac 285, peace and blessings. We're glad you're here. Big brother Roy, peace and blessings, big bro. We're glad you're here. Earth Angel 1105 remix. We are glad that you're here. Peace and blessings, Queen. John Cahoon, peace and blessings. We are glad you're here. Emerald Modesty, peace and blessings, Queen. We are glad you're here. And Kamathi, peace and blessings. We are glad you are here.
Welcome all.
Welcome.
Trying to be
electricity.
What you need electricity to play a saxophone for? To act like you back at the juke joint and light you some candles and get to blowing.
So, Doc, let me ask you, as a historian, why is it a simple act of Black people building economic self-sufficiency from the Reconstruction era all the way to the Black Power era, always been treated as a radical and threatening political statement by the American power structure. Why did America see it?
Because it is. It is that's the lens that they're looking at the world through. It's threatening to them. It disturbs them. You have to remember that if we go back to the Great Migration and look at Black folk, especially when the Great Migration is going to accelerate surrounding World War I, Black folk had to escape the South because them white folk did not want to let them go. Okay, so they treated us horribly, but they knew that their wealth rested upon our labor. So you can't separate or divorce that. The idea that white folk are going to always be preoccupied with what it is that Black folk are doing. And so much of it is going to boil down to what you were talking about earlier when you talked about the idea of them being fearful of revenge. There's a guilt associated with knowing what your ancestors did to our ancestors. And in many ways, the commentary of viewing it as a threat to your existence, to your mighty society and your mighty existence is revealing in this way. Because in many ways, what you're saying is, if it was me, if it was my people, we would get y'all Black asses back for slavery. So that's why they're viewing it as a threat, because there's an eternal fear and guilt. And there is also, it could be argued that they know that it's due and that it would be just.
Definitely. Doc, when we're looking at the three men that we talked about earlier, Booker T. Washington, Marcus Garvey, Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, some people see them as having a very different approach to the problem of our people. But what was the common thread in their economic philosophies? And how did they all view the dollar as necessary tool for Black liberation?
Do for self. Each one of those figures that you're talking about is operating from a position of do for self. And that Black folk are going to have to work. Booker T. Washington uses this phraseology in the 1895 speech. He says quite simply, in the great leap towards freedom, we must always remember that the vast majority of us are going to work with our hands. You look at that argument and you look at what the other two did, and it's natural, to be honest with you. It's natural and it's logical. If you really think about it, Garvey was inspired by Booker T. Washington and was actually coming to America to meet with Booker T. Washington, but Washington died while Garvey was in transit. Okay. I've told people this, when you're talking about the economic philosophy and priorities of the Nation of Islam, the Nation of Islam's economic priorities are nothing new. It is Booker T. Washington's Tuskegee plan with an assalamu alaikum on top of it. Okay, it's the same thing. You're talking about farms. You're talking about developing Black wealth. It's the same thing. It's the same program. The only difference that you could have is that the Nation of Islam has never been dependent upon white patronage. They're not counting on Carnegie, Rockefeller, Ford, and people of that ilk to support them financially. Booker T. Washington had to. So in many ways, you take a figure like Malcolm, you can trace Malcolm's development and lineage straight back to Garvey, and Garvey straight to Booker T. Washington. So the plan is nothing new. The plan is nothing, when Garvey's talking about the UNIA and the development of the Black Star Line, his shipping line, what are they shipping? They're shipping products that Black folk have actually produced and made to every part of the world. And a part of Garvey's magic is quite simply getting Black folk to take the constraints off of their minds. And instead of saying, well, yeah, you know what, I want to start this because I want to sell it to my people. Well, Garvey is saying, yo, when you talk about your people, talk about Africans too. And also realize that Brazil is Black as well.
So, Doc, let me ask you, this is going to be a two-part question, so I'll ask you the first part first.
Thank you.
No, you're welcome. Beyond the obvious external oppositions from white supremacy, what are some of the internal debates or challenges within the Black community itself regarding the do for self philosophy that you just spoke of?
The thing is that everything starts with the mind, with your ability to conceive some things. And if your mind has been fed a intellectual diet that has told you that Black folk can't handle business, that Black folk can't accomplish anything, that Black folk are lazy, that's a hell of an obstacle to try and conquer, because you don't believe in them. And if you don't believe in them, you don't have any faith, then what are we doing here? Who's the brother that makes all the economic sense in the world? John Bryant. This brother was talking about quit giving white folk so much credit. White folk ain't make you ruin your credit. You did that. In the same way that you ruined it, you can make it better. So there has to be a psychological component of the healing of the mind and the development of belief that Black folk can do anything in the world, that you're just as good as them. Malcolm, when he had that great riff where he says quite simply, when you compare yourself to the white man, who's he to compare yourself to? You'll find that old pale thing out there using man-tan, trying to get to look like you. So a big part of it is being able to conceive the idea of winning. That's a major part.
Excellent. So was there ever a significant pushback against economic separation in favor of integration?
I don't think there was a pushback against what do you call it, economic separation?
Yes.
I think that by virtue that the mainstream civil rights movement is pursuing integration, that what goes along with that, unfortunately, is the dismantling of Black economic self-sufficiency, the circulating of the Black dollar, because now you are trying to spread yourself, quote unquote, thin with other communities as well. Lackawanna Blues, great movie. If you've never seen Lackawanna Blues, you should watch it. But Hill Harper has this moment where Nanny, the central character of the entire story, has gotten older. He's matured into an adult male, and he's walking on an errand for Nanny. And you have this cold street with all this wind blowing, snow blowing. And he says this line, which is so true. He says, "We never realized while we were pursuing integration that every time a white door opened, a Black one closed." And our people seemingly weren't able to differentiate between fighting for the right to go anywhere you want to versus the need to go to those places. I agree with the fight, just like I was talking earlier about the right to free speech for everyone.
Right.
I agree with that. I agree that they had the right, that they deserved the right to go wherever they wanted to. But I disagree wholeheartedly that they should have been up in Woolworths. They should have been up in Cresses after they won the right to do it. Where did you go eat before? Because those dollars that you're now siphoning off and depositing in the pocket of Mr. Woolworth and Miss Cress, those businesses, those Black businesses, were probably already operating on a razor thin profit margin. And here you're going to pull 30, 40, 50, if not 60, 70% of their business away because now you can go over there and sit and eat with white folk.
Mm.
And we all know their food don't compare to ours.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Doc, do you think, because that's a very great point that you just brought up, and I didn't even think about that when I was making up the program, but do you think that part that the government took into consideration when it eventually agreed with the integration, that this would be a way to destroy Black business and also to keep Black people's money going into white pockets?
No, I don't think that they had that much foresight. I think that what occurs is that white folk make the most prudent and best decision for them. And you'd better figure out what your next move is. So I don't think it was some big, large plan or anything like that. And one of the more unfortunate things that when you go back and you look, because really what we're talking about is the Brown decision.
Mm-hmm.
And the Brown decision is what's going to overturn Plessy v. Ferguson of 1896. So you have 58 years of official state-sanctioned racial segregation.
Mm. So basically, we destroyed ourselves because we wanted to be
integrated yourself out. You limited integration, integrated yourself out of power. That's what you did. And you in many ways, I mean, think about it this way. When Black parents send their children off to college,
mm-hmm.
they're sending their children off to get an education because there's a formula. You get an education, you'll be able to get a better job, you'll be able to make more money.
Right.
Instead of, we're going to send you to get a business degree so that you can come back home and you can help run the family grocery store, and maybe we can expand it and have a chain of them. Black folk took pride in then, as they do now, with their children going to work for white corporations.
Mm.
Okay, he's a computer analyst for Microsoft.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he's working for so and so with the, and that's a Fortune 500 company right there that my boy is working for. Mm-hmm. So we took pride in that. Okay, and what went along with that is quite simply greater financial resources, without a doubt. But at the same time, that you have greater financial resources for what the boys would refer to as the talented 10th, that untalented 90 is going to be left behind. And we can see what leaving them behind actually has wrought us. Urban communities where sensible, sane Black folk are scared to even live. It's one of the reasons why you've seen the population of a city like Chicago go down, because people are pulling their kids out of there and moving back south to where they deem it to be safer.
Mm-hmm. Wow. We did it to our damn selves.
Well, I mean, in their defense, they were, it hadn't been tried before, but the inability and the failure to have a counterbalancing advertising campaign that said, listen, don't forget to patronize your own. We went hog wild. Mm-hmm. In regards to where we worked at after we matriculated from colleges. And keep in mind that by the mid 1960s, the quote unquote best of the best of our community, they're going to predominantly white institutions, and they're learning white value systems. They're not operating along Black value systems anymore. You know, that it's the reason why they don't come back and buy the block up. What they do is they go buy a house in a gated community.
Mhm.
They keep these Negroes that they used to live by, that they're still related to, from
Right.
getting up in there easily.
Mhm.
So you can say you did it to yourself, but it's a lot more dynamic than that.
You know, I was thinking on setting this up, this issue we briefly talked about it last week, where we talked about the integration of the children, bringing the black children into the white schools. That
Mhm.
they also had to integrate the black teachers into the white schools as well. And we always hear about the children, but we never hear about what the teachers went through. I want to ask the mindset, because for me, if I was a parent back then, I would damn sure would not have sent my child into that foolishness. It just wouldn't have never have happened. I wouldn't have done that.
What would you have done?
They'd have stayed at the black school. I'd have told them at home my damn self, but they not going
Well, you would have
there.
had you would have had to keep them at home, because people are being ordered to these schools. I'll give you a perfect example that I lived on Dale. My parents lived on Dale Avenue. The next street over was home.
Mm-hmm.
The kids at home who lived at home on home,
Mm-hmm.
they went to Hedges Elementary, predominantly black school. The kids on Dale Avenue, we went to Ranchwood, a white suburban school, and our backyards touched each other.
Mm-hmm.
So they carved up black communities and said, listen, well, your kids are going to go here. Your kids are going to go here. I went to Hedges, even though I stayed on Dale Avenue, because my parents put my address down as if it was my Aunt Bobby's address. And
Mm-hmm.
every morning when my mother was on her way to work, she would drop me off at my Aunt Bobby's so that the people could see me walking from that direction.
Well, okay, because I never knew that they were made to do this.
Yeah.
But if that's so, why were we only seeing one, two, or maybe three children going, and not a whole lot of black children going? If they were
No,
made,
but see, what you're talking about is the Southern school desegregation movement. I'm not talking about the Southern school desegregation movement. I'm talking about what happened in Mansfield, Ohio, how they made a decision that we need this many children here, this many children there.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, what you're talking about in the South, look at because I'll talk about this one because it's the best known Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas.
Mhm.
There's only 9 that went. And the reason that there were only 9 that went is that those 9, it's similar to the integration of Major League Baseball. Jackie Robinson was not the best Negro League player. If you're talking about the best Negro League position player, it's Josh Gibson,
Oh
without a
yeah.
doubt.
Yeah.
There's only one man in the history of Yankee Stadium, the house that Ruth built. There's only one man that ever hit a ball out of Yankee Stadium. Babe Ruth couldn't do it. Josh
Mm.
Gibson did. Okay, when they measured Josh Gibson's home run, it went
Mhm.
785 feet. Think about that. It would
Mm.
have been a home run twice. He knocked the ball out of Yankee Stadium. Okay, not out the park, out the entire stadium. Why
Mm.
not? Why not Josh instead of Jackie? Well, Josh Gibson was an alcoholic, and if you look at his actions now, through present medical and psychological terms, he was definitely bipolar. Hit Josh with the ball and see what happened. Okay, like they did Jackie. They intentionally hit Jackie's ass, but he had the right temperament and outlook and understanding to let them white folk dog him out and spit on him and do all of that shit. You couldn't do that with Josh. And there's a reason why Satchel Paige wasn't put up there, or another black pitcher. Because imagine a black man throwing a ball and hitting a white man. So the Little Rock Nine, okay, they selected those 9 because they were bright, brilliant students. They had the right temperament, okay? And if they failed, it would prove all of the negative things that white folks said about black folk, being dim-witted, dumb, damn near retarded, intellectually inferior. So you got to pick the right 9. You got to pick the right ones to go, because they are in many ways ambassadors for the black community. Now we're going to put them through hell, but you never lose frame. You never let them know that they're getting to you. Remember, I know you remember this very well. When Netanyahu went up in the White House and berated Obama, I remember how mad you were.
Yep, still mad.
Man, I would have such and such, and I'm like, but how does that play out if he does that? How does it play out? Because it's going to play out very, very differently. You know, I got a colleague who told me a story. He was working for a university system, high-ranking administrator. He gets a complaint. He had 3 or 4 secretaries. He gets a complaint. They sent their complaint directly to the president, said that he was intimidating. Okay, he's a big black brother. Okay, it upset him to the point he asked for a meeting, wanted them to be there. And they said, well, yeah, you know, you intimidate us and this. And he said, what exactly am I doing? He said that white woman lowered her head and said, you're doing it right now. It plays differently. And he ultimately ended up leaving that job. You know, it plays differently, and you know it plays differently when it's us. You know, that's why come on. You know, there's a photographer who was down in Nashville when the sit-in movement was occurring. He said that, you know, the regular students were nonviolent and they was getting their ass whooped. He said all of a sudden you saw these big, humongous black dudes come walking around the corner. Okay, and a white dude went up there because he's used to just smacking black folk, and tried to smack one of them. They grabbed him and stomped him. Okay, and said that he's looking up and he says, "Who are you guys? Who are you guys?" And said, and it turned out to be what's the black Fisk. It turned out to be the football players from Fisk, who were tired of seeing their girlfriends and their friends get whooped on. Okay. And the reporter wrote down, he said that brother looked at that white dude and said, we the Union Army, we done came to free the slaves. You can't send everybody. They couldn't send you. Man, please. Please. You want the Supreme Court to have to redo the Brown decision? Be like, look, let's give it another 50 years. Could you imagine how you would behave?
Oh my God!
If they just threw soup on you for no reason and then stood there and laughed.
Oh yeah.
That's why there's so few in the South. You know, because if you send a bunch at one time, they gonna squad up, and you gonna have battle royal every single day.
Wow. So, Doc, let's look at the Nation of Islam's economic program under the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, which you correctly called Do for Self. Now, it was remarkably successful. From your labor history perspective, what were the key structural elements like disciplined workforce, internal market, and the centralized treasury that made the model uniquely effective compared to other economic movements? What do you think were?
Well, I mean, the thing is, number one, when you're dealing with black folk, let's be very clear on who we're talking about. You're dealing with a Southern population, okay, a population that are, and let's call them what they are. They are agricultural geniuses. If we can't do nothing else, we can grow something.
Right.
Okay? It's just what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of what Booker T. Washington was talking about when he says, quite simply, what we need to do is give them some business acumen. If they get some land, they already got the knowledge and the skill. They need some land and a little bit of money, and they're going to be able to make it. The worst thing that happened to Black folk when they came out of slavery was that they weren't given land. If they had been given land, it would be a whole different story. So when you have that, and Booker, and I'll use this, Booker T. Washington always talked in these kind of messianic parables, and he talks about a Black girl coming to Tuskegee, and she has a letter from her mother that she gives to Mr. Washington, and Booker T. Washington says the letter said, "Dear Mr. Washington, I'm entrusting in you my most prized possession, my daughter. I entrust that by the time she's done with her study, she will be an educated, refined, classy young lady. I have but one request, and that request is that she not be forced to learn anything dealing with laundry. Because, see, I'm a laundress, and I've done this my entire life, and I want something better for my daughter." Booker T. Washington folded the note back up, handed it to the young lady, and said, "Give me a couple of days to think about this to see if I'll even allow you to remain here." Booker T. Washington was pissed. Okay. He was pissed because his people still wasn't getting it. The demand should have been that she studies nothing but laundry. Because if you're a laundress and you've been taking in clothes, and you done saved up enough money to send your daughter to college, because ain't no FAFSA, God damn it, you got a business. And what we need to do is build upon that business. She could very well be the one that creates the washing machine, creates the dryer, creates fabric softener. But all of that is going to go by the wayside, all those opportunities, because you consider it to be work beneath you, manual labor. So when you're talking about the Nation of Islam and what they were able to do, they're equipping Black men who have knowledge to grow something, okay, with a little business guidance, a little financial help, some financial seeds. Grow it, and we will bring it into the mosque, into the masjid. We will sell it within our communities. That's, I'm not going to call it genius, but it's the most logical and rational way to go forward when you're talking about us as a people. You know, so what makes them different? They had a plan, and they executed that plan, and they kept that plan in-house. They didn't have to go out and beg white folk for a bank loan so that they could do all kind of devilish deeds surrounding it that ultimately ends up with them ending up with the product and the land. And that's a very simple lesson that is seemingly very difficult for our people to comprehend.
Deep. Now, out of the three, Doc, out of Booker T. Washington, Marcus Garvey, and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Marcus Garvey's vision is still moving and working. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad vision is still moving and working. Marcus Garvey's is not. Or let me rephrase it.
Whoa. You got Omar? What are you talking about? That's some disrespectful shit right there. Umar is on the battleground every day. Okay, ain't showing nobody his knuckles. All he's showing is pure palm. About bless me. FDMG, baby, Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey Academy. Don't shortchange him.
Shit, I think Marcus Garvey, Frederick Douglass, both they would come up and whoop his ass for even thinking about saying their name.
Garvey's vision ain't man, please. He operating out of the best tradition of Garvey. They got Garvey for mail fraud. Umar still he walking in his steps.
So do you think that what was the main reason that Marcus Garvey movement, for all intents and purposes, was gone once he was deported? Because once Booker T. Washington, passed away, but his stuff kept moving. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad went on, his stuff kept moving. But Marcus didn't keep moving. Why?
But you have to remember that what's going on when Garvey comes here. Garvey, very much like Malcolm. Malcolm had a public nemesis that they didn't have Twitter, they didn't have any, so they were writing letters in the newspaper. Malcolm's nemesis was Jackie Robinson. Okay, go back and read them letters. They were shooting at each other. It gets downright embarrassing. But Garvey is opposed, and it's ironic, how we talked about Southerners being fought against and opposed by Northerners during the Great Migration. Garvey is going to be opposed by a very prominent and very, very powerful Black Negro intelligentsia headed by Du Bois. Du Bois is not yet at that point where he's going to embrace Pan-Africanism. And Du Bois refers to Garvey as a stranger, a foreigner, and tells Black people, don't trust this foreigner. You don't know nothing about him. Okay, why would you trust somebody like that? So you have that working against Garvey. And then the fact is that Garvey is going to, in many ways, I'm not going to call it a mistake because he organized who was willing to join him, but it's very similar to what the Panthers did. They rested their organization upon the lumpen proletariat, what Marx would call the lumpen proletariat. Okay, the brothers on the block. Garvey does similar. When Du Bois is talking about the talented 10, Garvey says, give me the untalented 90 then. And the problem with the untalented 90 is quite simply, they don't possess the necessary bourgeoisie skills, the writing, the organizing skills. They're well-meaning, they're good-hearted, but they don't possess those skills to keep an organization, a local, let alone a state or national or international organization going. So he's behind the 8 ball, and he doesn't have the Black intelligentsia, the Black leaders of this land. They're not supporting him. They're not going to fall in line with what Garvey's talking about. He's looked at it as a foreigner. Du Bois publicly called him a foreigner. And Garvey responded by telling Du Bois, you write like a child. And you have definitely overstated your importance in my life. Yeah. So even back then, you had Black leaders, Black folk in general, attacking each other. So all of these fabled ideas about, oh yeah, what we need to be able to do is, get along like they got along back then. Oh, nothing could be further from the truth. Garvey and Du Bois were at each other's throat. Malcolm and Jackie Robinson was at each other's throat. Fred Hampton and Mr. Farrakhan, both of them in Chicago, had their moment. Okay, where Mr. Farrakhan said, go get that boy, bring him here, and they had their moment. So there's a inability to cooperate that in many ways is a signature identity of our organizations and leadership, unfortunately.
Wow. Okay, Doc. So we're at our time, but when you give your closing comments, I do have one other question that I want you to answer while you're doing your closing comment. And the question says, we know that the COINTELPRO targeted, no, not that one. What is the single most important lesson modern Black entrepreneurs and community builders can learn from the NOI's economic blueprint when it comes to creating systems that are resilient and can withstand both internal and external pressures today, not only using the NOI's model, but also Booker T's?
What I would say is always go back to basics and develop an ability in a way to almost be self-sufficient. Because the more moving pieces you got, the more parts you got, the greater the chances are that something will fail. If you go back and you look at the career of Andrew Carnegie, steel man, Andrew Carnegie could guarantee you, and this was his selling point, I guarantee that you will get your steel from US Steel on the day that I told you you'll get it. You don't have to worry about a strike with us, because Andrew Carnegie knew there wouldn't be a strike because he owned the mines. He owned the miners. He didn't allow them to unionize. He owned his own railroads. He owned the transportation to the mill. He owned the steel mill workers, the creation of the steel. And once again, he owned the railroad. So when it was put on a rail car, he could control when and where it would go. So keep your circle tight.
Mm.
And in many ways, do the best that you can as far as maintaining your autonomy and your independence. And that's saying a lot. That extends much further than what percentage of the business do you own. I'm talking about the idea of not having a external entity that can do anything or say anything that would in any way lessen, damage, or compromise your ability to have an A+ product.
Exactly. Do you see, Doc, that at some point we'll be able to honestly, as a group, understand the principles of do for self and begin to pick it up and do it where there won't be Chinese stores in our community? They'll be replaced with Black stores. There, won't be going to the China people for hair and all this. They'll be going to Blacks, and Black people actually treating each other with the due respect that they should. Do you see that?
I hate to say never, but what I will say is that those things are all impossible until Black folk in mass are teaching their own a relevant curriculum that works for Black folk. As long as you're teaching a foreign curriculum to our people, they're going to act like that foreign people because they know nothing else. What else could they possibly be or do if if they don't know their own name? You don't know your name. You don't know your culture. And in many ways, so much of what it is that our people are exposed to, it's negative and anti-Black programming, from the music to the videos to the television shows and what have you. And it's sort of like, have you ever talked to anyone who has weaned themselves off of sugar and use a sugar substitute when they want something sweet? Let them go back and take a drink of something that is laden with sugar, and they'll tell you, "Woo, this is too sweet."
Mm.
They no longer have an appetite for it. They no longer have a tolerance for it. I believe that Black ignorance is something that our people become very acclimated to. And if left to their own devices for too long, it becomes the personification of what it means to be Black.
Mm. Wow. Excellent. Thank you, Doc. We're going to go ahead and move to closing comments.
Man, I'm just happy to be here, man. Like I said, I was at a conference earlier today, and I rushed home. I actually got in an Uber and made it home. Specifically for this. I didn't want to do this work up in the hotel room or what have you. That was an option, but now I want to come home. I need to be home. This is my base of power, my source of power. So. Glad to be here with y'all. Enjoy you, each and every one of you, and tell others about the show. And thank you for all your support and your love. Peace.
Peace. Thank you, Doc. And you know that we are definitely grateful for you being with us, because it does make a difference. I was asked several times, because sometimes when I be on here, I do be sleepy, I be tired. And people have asked me, dude, why don't you just go to sleep and forget the program? Just go to sleep. But I can't, because this is part of my sacrifice. We have to have things that we willing to sacrifice for. So I may be tired, but I'm going to be right here because this is my duty. This is what I love to do. And I know that we're doing a good job in feeding our people. And I also want to say, for far too long, we have prayed for a new world while participating in the old one that is destroying us. We have asked God for deliverance while we're waiting on our oppressors to deliver it. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has warned us that the period of waiting is over. The time for building is now. And this is what we must do. We have to build. We have to build. We can't wait on and continue to pray that there's going to be a benevolent white man that's going to come, or benevolent white woman that's going to come to save us. It's just not going to happen. And, I was listening to, what's your girl name? That just ran for president and lost? Harris.
Kamala.
Yes.
Kamala.
I was listening to her book that she wrote about the 106 or 107 days. And when I listened to her, and I'm still saying to myself, this is why you lost. Because you're in a mode that's not going to get it. That's just not going to be acceptable. And I believe that our people have to go beyond of accepting what they call normal. And we have to be more dedicated to what we need as a people and be courageous enough to run for office, but do it in our own way. White folks have a coded language, and I believe we have to develop our own language, that when our people hear what we're saying, they understand what they're saying. Now, they may say in front of white folks, man, I ain't voting for that nigga. But when they get in that voting booth, bing, they vote for that nigga and be voting for him proud. We have to be able to develop this, because the status quo just can't, it's just not going to work. And goddamn, we don't know what condition America going to be in after these, 3 years left that Trump has in office. We don't know. This nigga allowing Carter to build their own military base on American soil. What the fuck is that? But hey, this is what it is. So, we got to wake up and understand what definitely needs to happen and be courageous enough to make it happen. And with that, I will say, you kill the nigga in you, I'm going to kill the nigga in me, and our God will reign supreme. We are Black first, today, tomorrow, and forever. Love you, family. Peace and blessings. Assalamu alaikum. Shalom.
Peace.
Peace.
So you better get the message and get it straight. You're going to need some bridge work. It's simple as that. Because we're living in judgment. We're living in implementation.